3 days of rain, no roof, no car, no hotel, and somehow dry socks. Think about that for a second. Not damp, not tolerable, completely dry. Now think about the last time you got caught in a 20-minute downpour and spent the rest of the day miserable. Squeaking shoes, cold collar. That specific kind of mood that only wet denim creates. There are people living outside right now who have cracked a problem that your $400 rain jacket hasn't. And the question that I couldn't stop thinking about wasn't what they use. It was how they think. What does your brain do when discomfort isn't an inconvenience? It's a death sentence? This isn't a video about poverty. This is about what happens to the human mind when comfort is no longer an option, what it figures out, what it builds, and what that reveals about every single one of us. Gear companies sell you confidence. The streets teach you physics. Here's something most people get completely backwards. When you picture someone caught in a rainstorm with nowhere to go, you picture them reacting, running for cover, scrambling, looking for anything overhead. But the people who actually survive extended rain, they are never reacting. They already moved 2 hours ago, before the tarp, before the shelter. Before any decision gets made, comes the sky. Dark gray clouds hanging low and thick, mean heavy rain is arriving within minutes. Get under cover now. But lighter gray with visible texture. That storm is already leaving. You have maybe 30 minutes before things start drying out. Those two skies look similar to most people. To someone whose comfort depends on reading them correctly, they are completely different documents. Wind is the other thing. When wind suddenly shifts direction, something is changing, usually within 30 to 60 minutes. People who have lived outside for years call this the flip. They trust it more than any weather application, because they have tested it thousands of times with their own body as the measuring instrument. I have used weather apps for years and still get caught in downpours. Meanwhile, I have spoken to people who can sense a storm shifting just from the way air moves through a specific intersection. That is not mysticism. That is compressed, unforgiving experience. Then, there is seasonal intelligence. Autumn storms in most American cities last a minimum of 2 to 3 days. Summer storms are gone in a few hours. Knowing which season you are in changes everything about how much you carry, where you sleep, and how long your backup plan needs to last. And here is the rule that ties all of this together. Any break in rain, even 20 minutes, is action time. Move locations, dry out gear, get food. The people who wait for perfect conditions are the people who never act. And on the streets, waiting is its own kind of danger. Because drainage matters just as much as rainfall. Hills shed water within an hour of rain stopping. Low areas near rivers, those stay wet for days, sometimes a week. Knowing which parts of your city drain fast and which parts turn into slow swamps, that is not trivia. That is navigation. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you solved a problem really well? And you had plenty of time, plenty of money, and plenty of options. If you are honest, probably not that often, because options are comfortable, and comfort is the enemy of creative thinking. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called constraint-driven thinking. The basic idea is this: when the brain has a backup plan, it uses the backup plan, but when there is no backup plan, something shifts. The brain stops looking for an exit and starts looking for a solution. I remember the first time this actually landed for me. Not as a concept, as a feeling. I was on a camping trip. Rain came in faster than expected. My gear was wrong for the conditions. And for about 40 minutes, I had this strange clarity. Not panic, clarity. Every decision was immediate and precise because there was simply no room for second guessing. That feeling. People living outside in extended rain experience a version of it every single night. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Is this just a way of making something genuinely brutal sound interesting? That is a fair question. I wrestled with it too. But here is where I landed. The solutions these people develop are real. They are grounded in physics and biology and pattern recognition. Understanding them matters, regardless of your circumstances, because the brain that solves problems under pressure is the same brain you are walking around with right now. It just needs the right conditions to show you what it can do. So what does constraint-driven thinking actually build? It starts with how you read a city. Most people look at a city and see streets, buildings, traffic lights, places to go, and places to be. Someone with no roof looks at the same city and sees a completely different map. They see geometry, angles, overhangs, the way concrete redirects water, the way wind wraps around corners. They see a city the way an engineer sees a drainage diagram. Except the stakes are personal, and the crown jewel of that map is the bridge underpass. Here is what most people miss about bridge underpasses. They are not just big and dry. They are precisely engineered. Civil engineers design road surfaces with a slight crown in the center, so water runs off toward the edges and into drains. That same geometry, applied to the ground beneath a bridge, means the center stays dry while the edges flood. A Seattle study found that 34% of homeless individuals listed bridge underpasses as their primary shelter during extended wet weather. 1 in 3. That is not a backup plan. That is the plan. But not all underpasses are equal. Flat ones flood. Ones with a slight elevation in the center stay bone dry. Learning which is which takes time. Veterans of street life have that knowledge mapped in their heads with the precision of someone who paid for it the hard way. And timing matters as much as location. Experienced people arrive hours before storms hit. They check forecasts at the library. They claim the center position, far from the edges where wind drives rain sideways. Before the first drop falls. By the time most people are scrambling, the good spots are already taken. The acoustics under a bridge also become a tool. Rain drumming on concrete is loud and constant. When that sound suddenly softens or stops, that is a signal, not to relax, to move, dry gear, restock, reposition. The silence is an alarm clock. Then there are vacant commercial buildings. Industrial roofing is engineered to handle decades of weather without a single failure. While a tarp setup might give out on day 3, these buildings just sit there, dry as a bone, empty as a promise. The signs are readable if you know what to look for. Mail stacking up at the entrance, weeds pushing through cracks in the parking lot, utility disconnection notices taped to the glass. These buildings announce themselves to anyone paying attention. Upper floors are almost always preferred. Security sweeps start at ground level. Most officers will not climb past the 3rd floor without a specific reason. That is not laziness. That is resource allocation. And it creates a window. Cities are not designed for people without homes, but they are not designed against them either. And that gap, that accidental gap built into the infrastructure by engineers who were thinking about cars and drainage and structural load, is exactly where survival happens. You might wonder why. If these spots work so well, they are not always crowded. The answer is timing. A perfect location means nothing if you arrive after the rain does, which is exactly why we started with the sky. Here's what stopped me when I was researching all of this. None of it was written down anywhere. No manual, no guidebook, no YouTube tutorial. Every piece of knowledge I just described, the bridge geometry, the drainage patterns, the timing, the signs on a vacant building, all of it lives inside people's heads. Built one rainy night at a time, through cold and discomfort and trial and error that most of us will never experience. So let's talk about what they build with their hands. A single tarp costs $15, and with the right setup, it outperforms shelter solutions that cost 50 times more. That is not an exaggeration. That is physics. The most important number in tarp science is 30 degrees. That is the angle that separates a functional shelter from a disaster waiting to happen. Steeper than 30 degrees and wind catches the surface like a sail, ripping stakes from the ground at 3 in the morning. Shallower than 30 degrees and water pools in the center, building weight until the whole thing collapses directly onto the person sleeping underneath it. 30 degrees is the balance point between gravity and wind resistance. It is also, not coincidentally, close to the optimal pitch used in residential roof design. The people who figured this out did not have an architecture degree. They had wet sleeping bags and enough nights to run the experiment. The most common setup is the A-frame, a rope tied between 2 anchor points. the tarp draped over the center. Water sheds in both directions symmetrically. It is the same principle as a pitched roof, just assembled in 20 minutes with whatever is available. But here is where most people make their critical mistake. They worry about rain coming down. The real enemy comes up. Ground moisture wicks upward through fabric through a process called capillary action. Within hours, a person sleeping on bare earth beneath a perfectly dry tarp is completely soaked from underneath. The tarp worked exactly as intended. The ground still won. This is why experienced builders use two tarps, one overhead, one underneath. The bottom layer breaks the capillary chain completely. Ground moisture has nowhere to go. The edges matter just as much. Water is patient. It will find any gap. The technique known as the burrito wrap involves rolling tarp edges inward and anchoring them with rocks, creating a sealed perimeter that stops both pooling and wind intrusion from below. The most advanced setups layer multiple tarps with deliberate air gaps between them. That air gap provides insulation and catches anything that leaks through the first layer. It is the same principle professional roofers use when installing underlayment beneath shingles. $15 of material. $15,000 of engineering logic. I tested the two-tarp method in my backyard on a rainy weekend, mostly to satisfy curiosity, partly convinced it was overkill. By morning, I owed the concept a genuine apology. The ground underneath was completely dry. The science is not complicated. It just required someone desperate enough to discover it. Everything we have talked about so far keeps water off your body. But here is the thing nobody tells you. Staying dry means nothing if your core temperature drops, because hypothermia does not wait for a blizzard. It shows up at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, a perfectly ordinary autumn evening, and it moves faster than most people realize. So let's talk about your body not as something to protect, but as a system to manage. The first principle is core priority. Your heart, lungs, and liver live in your torso. Lose heat there, and organ function begins to fail. Your arms and legs have a built-in defense mechanism. Blood vessels constrict to reduce heat loss at the extremities and protect the center. Your torso has no equivalent mechanism. It depends entirely on what you do for it. This is why experienced people on the streets will sacrifice dry arms and dry legs without hesitation to protect a dry core. Wet limbs are miserable. A wet torso is dangerous. The simplest version of this costs nothing. A plastic bag worn against the skin beneath regular clothing creates an invisible moisture barrier around the core. No one can see it. It weighs almost nothing, and it holds body temperature steady even when outer layers are completely soaked. Street veterans call it the dry core strategy. It sounds too simple to work. The physics disagree. Then there is food timing. Digestion generates heat. The process of breaking down high-calorie food, peanut butter, nuts, a fast food burger, produces internal warmth through a process called thermogenesis. Eat right before sleeping, and your body runs its own furnace for 4 to 6 hours. You are essentially preloading heat into the system before shutting down for the night. Shivering is where most people misread the signal. Shivering feels like a warning to get warm soon. It is actually an emergency alarm. The body is burning calories faster than it does during a run, trying to generate heat through muscle movement. Once shivering starts, the window to act is measured in hours, not the next morning. Hours, even in temperatures well above freezing. The fetal position is not just comfortable, it is a heat retention technique. Pulling knees to chest and tucking hands into armpits reduces the surface area of skin exposed to cold air by up to 30%. Less skin touching cold air means less heat escaping. Simple geometry with real consequences. Sleep cycles matter too. Lying still for 8 hours straight causes core temperature to drop gradually as the body's heat production slows. Experienced people rest for 2 to 3 hours. Move briefly to restart heat generation, then rest again. It is exhausting, but exhaustion is recoverable. Hypothermia is not always. NASA engineers once solved a life support crisis aboard Apollo 13 using cardboard and tape, not because they were smarter in that specific moment, but because 3 people would die if they were not. Constraint clarifies thinking in a way that comfort never does. The people managing their body temperature on the streets every winter are running the same calculation, every single night, with no mission control listening in. This sounds like edge case survival information until you remember that 50 degrees Fahrenheit is a perfectly normal October evening in most American cities. The line between uncomfortable and genuinely dangerous is much thinner than most people walking past ever stop to consider. There is a donation sitting in a charity bin somewhere right now that is going to make someone's rainy week significantly more dangerous. It is a cotton hoodie. It was given with genuine kindness, and in sustained rain, it is close to useless. Here is why. Cotton fiber is made of cellulose. Cellulose is hydrophilic, meaning it actively attracts water molecules into the core of each individual strand. Once saturated, that moisture is locked inside the fiber. It cannot evaporate quickly because it is not sitting on the surface. It is buried inside the material itself. Cotton takes 12 or more hours to dry without heat, and the entire time it is drying, it is pulling warmth directly out of the body pressed against it. Wearing wet cotton in cold rain is not uncomfortable. It is mechanically similar to wearing a refrigerator against your skin. Polyester and synthetic fabrics work on a completely different principle. The fibers are hollow and non-absorbent. Moisture gets pushed to the outer surface of the fabric, where air can reach it, and evaporates within 2 to 3 hours, even without any heat source, even in the rain. This difference is not a matter of brand or price. It is molecular structure. A $15 polyester shirt from a thrift store outperforms a $50 cotton hoodie in every sustained rain scenario, every single time. The human dryer technique sounds strange until you understand the physics. Wearing damp clothing while sleeping allows body heat to drive evaporation through the fabric overnight. You wake up to dry clothes, not because anything magical happened, because your body generated enough heat to do the work while you were unconscious. The rotation system builds on this. Wet socks go on the feet. Dry socks hang off the outside of the backpack where walking speed creates airflow. By afternoon, the hanging pair is dry, you swap, the cycle continues, and then there is the nuclear option. One complete dry outfit, sealed inside multiple plastic bags, kept in reserve, never touched except in genuine emergency. That sealed outfit is not clothing. It is a reset button. Trench foot is not a relic of the First World War. It happens on American streets every winter. Skin in sustained contact with damp fabric begins to break down within days. Fungal infections follow, then open sores, then something much worse. The margin between someone who survives an extended rainy week and someone who does not is often a fabric choice. Cotton versus polyester. That is the distance. Cotton hoodies feel like kindness. In sustained rain, they are closer to a liability. The $15 polyester shirt is the more compassionate gift. It is just harder to photograph for a charity campaign. Every financial advisor will tell you the same thing. Do not keep all your assets in one place. Spread the risk. Distribute the exposure. Because when one node fails, the whole system should not fail with it. People surviving extended rain on the streets figured out the same principle, except instead of investment portfolios, they are distributing dry socks. The smartest individuals maintain 3 to 5 hidden stashes across their territory, one near their primary shelter location, one near the food bank, one somewhere only they know about. The logic is simple and airtight. If someone steals your backpack, you're not starting from zero. You are walking 15 minutes to backup number 2. Containers are chosen carefully. 5-gallon buckets with sealed lids buried shallow in parks where nobody thinks to dig. Military surplus dry sacks that cost around $20 and keep contents completely dry even if submerged in water. The container is not an afterthought. It is the whole point. Hiding spots get creative in ways that make sense once you think about them. Behind dumpsters that never get moved, inside hollow spaces in wooded areas, wedged into gaps between highway barriers, locations that are visible enough to find again, but unremarkable enough that nobody else notices them. The rotation system ties everything together. You arrive at a stash wearing wet clothes. You change into the dry set you left there days ago. You seal your wet gear inside the waterproof container. On the next dry day, you come back and swap again. Continuous access to dry clothing without ever needing a laundromat or a dryer or a permanent address. Here is the thing that surprised me most when I learned about this system. The item stored most carefully across these stashes is not clothing. It is not food. It is dry plastic bags. A supply of dry plastic bags means you can waterproof anything you find during a storm. A phone someone gave you, documents you need, food you managed to get. Dry plastic bags are the raw material for solving problems you have not encountered yet. On the streets, that makes them currency. Some communities take this further. Informal storage agreements where one person keeps another person's supplies at their stash location in exchange for the same service. Distribution equals security. It is the same logic as a distributed server backup system, except the data being protected is the difference between sleeping dry or not. 5 hiding spots across a city sounds paranoid until you reframe it. Emergency fund, backup hard drive, spare house key, secondary emergency contact. We all run distributed systems to protect the things that matter. The difference is simply what is at stake when the system gets tested. Somewhere tonight, in some city. Someone is checking the sky before everyone else does. They're doing math in their head, wind direction, drainage patterns. How many hours until the next break in rain? How long this storm is likely to last based on the season and the way the clouds are sitting. They have no application telling them this, no notification, no alert. They built the algorithm themselves, one wet night at a time, through cold and discomfort and consequences that most of us will never experience firsthand. Everything in this video, the bridge geometry, the tarp angles, the fabric science, the stash systems, the body heat management. None of it came from a textbook or a gear catalog or a survival course. It came from people with no other option. People whose margin for error was measured not in inconvenience, but in whether they woke up the next morning. That is not a survival guide. That is engineering, applied thermodynamics, behavioral adaptation under pressure, risk distribution, pattern recognition developed through thousands of hours of unforgiving field testing. I did not walk away from researching this with a list of tips. I walked away with something quieter, a genuine respect for what human beings are capable of building when they have no other choice. And honestly, a little embarrassed by how much I overthink problems that I have the luxury of overthinking. There is a version of intelligence that only unlocks under pressure. That only appears when the comfortable options run out. We do not talk about it much because it rarely shows up in places we think to look. Ingenuity is not a trait of the comfortable. It is a trait of the cornered. Thank you for watching this video all the way through. It genuinely means a lot. If this made you think differently about something, even just one thing, consider subscribing to the channel. There is a lot more where this came from, and I will see you in the next one.